Margit, why are you the right person to serve on Wilton's Planning and Zoning Commission?
I think that I am the right person because I have a long history with Wilton. I'm both someone who knew it in the 80s and 90s. I grew up in New Canaan, spent a significant amount of my childhood visiting with my close friend who lived in Wilton. I left, I came back. Now I have a fresh perspective, a memory of the past. I'm also really passionate about the town. I chose this town out of other towns around here. I could have moved to Weston or, New Canaan, Westport. They're all great, but Wilton was my dream place and I care for it deeply and I want to affect the changes that are coming in Wilton in a positive way that incorporates the town's opinion and also guides it cohesively toward a thriving future.
So your background is a little different,
Yeah,
from I guess I would say the kind of classic P and Z person. Not
right.
architecture, not land use attorney, not like that.
Mhm.
Tell us about your background and why that is a fit for planning and zoning.
Um, I think that I have a significant amount of long-term strategic planning. To take an idea from a concept sometimes that has been sold just as one, description on a piece of paper, turn it into, uh, fully produce and develop it out, turn it into something that can then be, delivered on time, under budget, and working with, 100+ people on a crew. It's a significant amount of pressure. Things have to happen on time. They need to happen quickly. Decisions need to be made in situations where you have everything worked out and then suddenly there's, things just happen to go wrong on that day and you have to make these choices. And I feel like I have a significant amount of passion and energy that I want to dedicate to the town. I love it here, and it's important to me to give back in a way that helps. And I feel like maybe some of that energy is well put to use in Wilton,
So,
specifically in planning and zoning. So,
so I think you actually missed exactly what your job title is. So tell people what that
oh,
is.
okay. So, for about the last 7 years when I was working in Los Angeles, I was a co-executive producer, which means that I'm I'm either running the show as a co-executive producer or I'm one step below the executive who is the showrunner. So, I've had situations where I'm the co-executive and I'm left alone, like, wait a sec, I've got the network. I've got a production company. I have, expectations of things to be done. And then suddenly it's all on me because, they didn't hire the executive or my executive won't be able to start on time. So I'll come in and get everything up and running. And then if we do our job well, we're basically just managing all of these other people who are coming to us with issues. So a lot of what I've done is unscripted, which can sound like it's like trashy reality, but I chose to navigate from those types of shows. So I did a significant amount of food competition shows that are really structured. So you then have to work with, a culinary producer to come up with the ideas, test the ideas, what you're going to do, but, get the cast, figure out the set design, work with the set designer, make sure that installs properly, have the director oversee everything. And then it's like, making sure that we craft this game in a way that is works well in terms of compliance. Dealing with the legal side of it because there's typically a prize involved, and that it also satisfies the excitement and that we capture all of these moments on camera. So I've done everything from casting to editing, from beginning to end. There's a significant amount of work I did. And when I chose to move to Wilton, it was because opportunities opened up within the industry when COVID hit, and we were all able to then work from home. And I've been incredibly fortunate to work from home for the last couple years, doing, a step down from what I would have done out in the field.
So I'm hearing so much about planning
Yeah.
and
Oh,
in,
thank you.
and
I'm great at
talk
that.
about planning. And you mentioned also, where Wilton's heading. Tell me
Hmm.
your assessment about where it is, where it seems to be going under the current P&Z, and where you'd like to see it go.
I'm going to try and be careful with how I say things. I think that Wilton has reached a point of, I don't want to say a tipping point. That feels like a too strong of an example, but I'm going to use it anyway. We have a lot of construction coming that the public maybe isn't informed about, whether that's their responsibility to be showing up at these meetings earlier on in the process, or that the current head of P&Z should be listening to them now. I understand, though, that, not a lot can be done to change where we're at. So it's I'm interested in figuring out how we can relate all of the stuff that's coming down the pipeline to the public. The taxpayers also have expressed that they're not having a good relationship with P&Z in terms of someone I spoke with said she's been trying to have her garage redone for like a year and a half. So there's this backlog as well. And then it's a complicated issue that I've been digging into. Obviously, 830G is affecting everything and in multiple towns around here, and that, Wilton is below the threshold on that. So I feel like in general, we just need to have more of a cohesive plan of design going into the future that takes into account Wilton's rural history, the stuff that we all love about our town, and find creative ways to work with the public, maybe, be more open about what's going on in terms of this development, and then structure things in a way that the plan of conservation and development sounds good on paper. There's a lot of things that I've read that, of course, we want more sidewalks, accessibility, for different types of community members to either come back after college or, downsize in the future. We do need more options, but is it being done carefully? Is it being done in line with our town? Could it be done better? And I think it can be. And that's where I kind of want to see how I can jump in there and help. And of course, I don't know everything. I'm a newcomer to town. I've got a fresh perspective and an old view as well. And I think that all of that energy and enthusiasm can really benefit Wilton, if that answered your question.
Are there specific ideas you have for whether it's improving that communication or getting the input or, making the POCD ideas more applicable or apply better to what people want now? What kind of specifics do you think you've got?
I think that it's like a twofold thing. Like, what can we imagine we want it to be, and what can we actually afford to do at this point? I have a lot of ideas that I think sound like what Wilton would benefit from, extending the sidewalks, coming up with a traffic plan for all of this in downtown Wilton Center. For all of the apartment people and their cars, we need to think about that. Maybe a more specific, either I think the P&Z should actually be more involved in the design plan versus just having a line saying colonial style, and yes, there are other specifics in terms of setbacks and things like that, but why not find creative ways to look at all of that? I'm really encouraged by Manresa, and I know that that's a huge undertaking You guys are aware of that in Norwalk. So the way that they have been communicating with the public was fantastic. They're going out with their designs, having, a tent, encouraging people to discuss. They want to include the public in this so that the people there feel like, hey, this is where we live. We care about this. We're invested as well. I think Wilton has opportunities to become more of a leader in environmental stuff in a way that, like, we obviously, love all of the trees and the green and the driving from Danbury to Norwalk. When you hit Wilton, it's just on Route 7, it just feels you're relaxed. It's really beautiful. So maintaining things like that, possibly, I'm just riffing here, but I think why not encourage a specific like 15% or 10% of any new build has to sorry, any new any new corporate type build needs to have 10 to 15% of mature trees left on the property, including easements like they've been doing with planning and zoning, which I think is fantastic, to continue access to the rivers. And then we have opportunities once we face some of the upkeep that needs to be done that has been overlooked for a while, like things that need to be repaired at the school or other structural things for our town. I'd like to see that be taken more, us to focus more on doing things that improve the community instead of just fixing things that we haven't looked at for a while.
You talked earlier about, you referenced what it's perception or people just not feeling that they're communicated with, they're connected with P&Z. What would you do differently, or what should the P&Z be doing differently?
I mean, I've heard that a number of people waited for a 3.5 hour long P&Z meeting, and that they were then told that there was no time for them. So if the community is clearly upset or confused and doesn't have the information about why things are happening, and it feels like it's a quick pace, maybe move some of those comments to the beginning. I think I'm unclear on all of the rules and regulations about why they are the way they are. It's my understanding that if I was on the commission, I could only speak during that, twice a month meeting. The community wants to be able to see that, but why couldn't we then also go out into the community and be more public about things and have more of an open dialogue? In my experience, if I'm working, the more we all communicate, the better. I don't have an issue with you going and talking to somebody, and I've talked to somebody else, and we get together, and then it just enhances our understanding of the issues because, we've spoken to all the people we need to. So I am a little concerned about the lack of transparency and outreach, and feel that, we can come up with other ways to do that.
How do you balance that with the statutory requirements that the commission has? I mean, in terms of the way things that are defined by the state, in the way and the order it gets discussed, or what can and can't be considered by the commission,
right,
that will then, perhaps leave the town, open to some sort of litigation from a developer if a decision goes a different way. I mean, how do you balance that out then?
I understand that. And of course, there are things that you can't talk about in terms of, once, you have millions of dollars and contracts being negotiated and designs, and there's a lot of things that you can't necessarily share. And the state obviously has rules about the way that this needs to be done. But since I am new and I don't know all the ins and outs, it is something that I excel at, looking at a situation, analyzing it, figuring out how it could run better. I know, there are places in town government that I think, why is that taking, what is the old rule or law that is causing this to be a little bit stickier than it needs to be? And by examining all of that, I could give you a much better answer once I've been digging around and figuring it out,
Well, you mentioned about the plan of conservation and
Yeah.
development, the one that was done in 2019, and we're not
Mhm.
quite there yet, but you're going to start that process in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
So, looking at the 2019 POCD, does that serve Wilton well still, or have the town's priorities changed, and become different in those last 7 or so years? And looking ahead, what do you think that needs to be thought about?
Um, I do think that we do need to have more of an openness to a variety of design styles. If you look at downtown, the library is a great example of, a mid-century modern that the town got annoyed about at one point. It doesn't fit in here, but it stood the test of time. It's gorgeous. It's a wonderful place. Something like that could also enhance that type of design, may serve communities as we move forward. In terms of I've heard complaints about the yellow building. I don't know all the addresses yet that that has restaurants and a nail salon, and people are saying, well, that's not colonial either. So rather than force something that may end up feeling like inexpensively done or tacky, I'd rather be a little bit more open and encourage some creativity that could bring us something like the library. You know, that would be, and I don't think that that's appropriate everywhere, but I think that if there was more willingness to encourage that type of creative, forward thinking, then it might be beneficial to us all.
Talking about the library, the building behind it that was
Oh, yeah.
went through the 830G process after a very long time in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission. That brings us to the talk about affordability. Wilton's affordability percentage right now is around 4%, which is well below that 10% threshold under 830G. So do you think that the town should require a new level for multifamily projects that come in front of the town?
What do you mean? Increase the threshold from the requirement on the builder so that we get more?
It's always that discussion about the numerator and the denominator. Every time
Right.
if you just continue to require 10%, you're never
Right.
going to catch up with what the state is requiring to get any kind of moratorium or
Totally.
to hit what the state is requiring. So do you think that there needs to be some reexamination of what Wilton's Planning and Zoning Commission is asking developers to come forward with? And what do you
Yeah.
think that level should be?
Um, I think, again, it's a complicated thing because the developers, of course, the more we want the affordable number to come up, it means that their rent has to go up because they're losing on certain apartments. I think that, sorry, I got distracted.
Or do you have any other thoughts? Maybe some new ways to look at affordability in Wilton.
Yeah, I think we actually probably should re-examine how we ask the developers to come in, and it would potentially slow down some of this development, but maybe bring us in some, more interesting creative types who are interested in what Wilton has to offer. Um, I'm not sure how much we should increase it. I'm a little unclear on that at this point.
I like we're talking about this question of is there a town nearby, New Canaan, Westport, Weston,
Yeah.
that you would like to see Wilton sort of shoot for? Something that
Well, New Canaan dug their heels in, I understand, and hasn't really had a lot of that additional development. Westport, I was encouraged by the Hamlet, but then I understand that's kind of going away, which was a mixed use, right? With shops and apartments. And now they're going to use 830G to potentially put a bunch of apartments in Westport.
But let me interrupt you. But how about
Yeah.
just an overall picture of what you'd like to see us shoot for in the next 5, 10, 20 years in comparison to other towns?
A town that might have a good
Yeah.
example of planning and zoning the way they've handled
Yeah.
it.
Um, I mean, I'm very encouraged by Darien with the way that they have transformed what was the post road, which wasn't thriving, into a completely, you know, businesses are doing well over there. The restaurants are back, and they've created a new, space. So I feel something that reimagines parts of Wilton as we look at Route 7 and figure out how um, we can meet those numbers by, the train tracks so that people can use the trains or bike around town. It's just in the town center, I think we need to be a lot more careful and, work with the developers more closely to make sure that, things are not, imagine walking around the Wilton Town Center with all of the buildings being the height of the new one behind the library. It feels very unlike Wilton, and I think, we have to be very cautious about how we do downtown. But I'd like to see a lot more environmentally friendly things like bike paths open up, finding ways to include roundabouts at at the 3, 4-way stops, especially in right where Rise is. I've heard there's been a number of accidents there, bike lanes and municipal parking potentially, things that could enhance, the town in a way that we have space for the new people and also still can enjoy Wilton, town center.
How do you think that we can encourage or change parking in Wilton Center to make it more walkable for their, where would you envision some sort of municipal parking situation?
I think that there could be where as you go to Rise, where the stop sign is across from Classically Kate's, there's a significant amount of space over there that potentially we could restructure some of that, potentially requiring underground parking for some of these new builds to make sure that they have enough space and we're not towering. I've also thought about, it'd be super cute if Wilton had like an electric trolley that would pick people up at maybe, where the Gulf station is and that other, the deli right next door, somewhere around there or over by Trackside, you could find some parking locations and have this electric trolley pick people up and shuttle them in, and then potentially condense some of the shopping to more so that you don't have to walk around and go from, the Stop and Shop all the way to Classically Kate's. You could potentially have things a little bit closer. But, we can imagine all we want, what's realistic and what's possible,
In talking about that, do you think there has been an emphasis on zoning in the last few years? So do you think that there needs to be more of a focus on planning, and how do you think we should go about doing that?
Oh, if this were a business, I would probably say we should handle the backlog quickly. We should get in there and, have catch up on where we're at, and then assess what the town's needs are, and then figure out ways to preserve. I love Route 7 with all of the trees. I love the idea of the church being done into condos. I think we need more condos for people who want, a different non-apartment style ownership. So I think that a lot of that stuff, the planning portion is, it's easy to do once you've cleaned up the backlog. You know, if you have a lot of stuff that's taking your attention, you can't necessarily think to the future because you're handling what you know, has piled up.
Well, you mentioned the electric trolley. If you could bring any amenity to Wilton, what would it be?
Oh, this might be controversial. I mean, we'll see. Polarizing might be the word. I would love to um, help Merwin Meadows become more of a town pride instead of something that potentially gets kids sick from geese poop every year. And some mothers don't feel safe letting their kids go in the water. So, you know, of course, I would love to see one of those environmentally friendly pools that's natural, that, you know, cleans itself, that could be integrated into our wetland area and not feel like it's completely obnoxious and out of place. And then, you know, as for the geese, you know, do like, you know, the silver streamers that scare them away and put some healthy geese food that's good for them somewhere else. So we discourage them rather than, you know, doing anything that wouldn't be good for them. A little dog barking noise occasionally. I think that enhancing Merwin Meadows in a way that thinks toward, you know, what it could be versus what it always has been. And I'd also love to see the town green become Wilton's pride in the center of town. Um, we use it. But I think that it needs more than a lick of paint, and it's the center of our town. And we could really, if we all invested, you know, time figuring out what we could use best in that space and how to enhance it and bring it back to life, I think that would be, you know, a home run for Wilton.
Okay.
I
Sort of.
like town pride, you know, I would like Wilton to really feel their town pride.
Okay. Sort of along those lines about your, you know, dream amenity. If you could bring any kind of business to Wilton, what would it be?
Ooh, probably I'd want to bring back, I'd like to see Wilton become more vibrant. When I was younger, it was like I would go to Wilton and I could spend, you know, the whole day and night there with the shops and the movie theater and the good restaurants. I'd love for my daughter to feel like she could hang out in Wilton for a long time and go shopping. And some of the things that she's said, is that CVS is the best place to shop in Wilton. And I mentioned that to another teenager who said, "Oh yeah, I feel the same way." So is it, you know, fun places for the kids to shop at, those teens that want to hang around town, and so clothing, stuff like that, that would bring in people from outside of town as well, and have Wilton become, you know, more diverse in terms of the clients that are coming to town. And larger signs that point to Wilton Town Center. That's another one. They're like about, you know, you'd fly past them if you didn't know that they were there.
That's another topic that we were talking
Yeah.
about. Is it's been challenging, and in fact, I think the Economic Development Committee has tried to push forward with improving signage, but in actuality, I think the P&Z is, I don't want to say they've purposely done it, but I know there's been some challenges trying to get P&Z to help move that forward. Anything you'd want to say about that initiative?
I'm not clear on the challenges. I don't know about that. I'm unaware that P&Z was the, you know, what stalled that. Can you give me more information about that?
Well, my understanding was that P&Z was going to engage a consultant to
Hmm.
help do a study into the signage, among some other things. And then my understanding, I think the consultant, there was a sort of stall, or it might have been financial, but it kind of got put on the back burner, I think. I know that the signage has been something that's been talked about for a long time.
Yeah.
Let's also differentiate too, just to be clear that, signage on Route 7
Yeah.
is something that's different because it has to do with the state and involving the Department of
Right.
Transportation. You've also got the bigger issue of signage and, businesses.
But we're
Business.
talking.
So, knowing, that the Economic Development Commission had done surveys of the businesses and residents
Yeah.
signage and trying to improve
Yep.
that. And then making their recommendations to planning and zoning. And that is what has sort of stalled. I mean, what are your thoughts about ways to move that along, or other things that can be done to improve Wilton's situation with signage?
Mm-hmm.
But to be clear,
Yeah.
we're talking about wayfinding, the directing, not just a sign on a store. I know that's been under study and discussion too, but talking about the signage that's directing people into the downtown as an example.
Right. I think that it's like the signs for downtown. I understand, we're going to have to work with the state, obviously, but it would be, I think we could potentially have more than one if that helps, as we're heading into town. It would be fantastic to have more of a, some sort of an archway that really highlights if you make the right or, the left from the Gulf into Wilton Town Center. Maybe there's an archway over that says, welcome to Wilton. And then those Route 7 signs can stay as they are, because it seems like a grander, like, oh, wow, this is Wilton. Okay. And in terms of Wilton Town Center, I need to be clear on how all of these individual buildings handle signage. So I spoke with a shop owner who has been unhappy with signage, and I was told that it was either the building or is it the Chamber of Commerce who in Wilton Town Center directs what is appropriate for the signage by building by building.
There are regulations, signage regulations that are, overseen by planning and zoning. They really, any of these sign regulations, need to be approved, and it's based on a certain coverage percentage. And there are certain rules about, whether or not, signs need to be lit from the ground up versus from the inside out, and things like that. There are all sorts of very strict rules that Wilton has set about business.
I do need to familiarize myself with all of that, but I also think that the stores and the businesses that are not in the front of, the street that people can see right away, there does need to be better signage that directs people to where those, businesses are. Point Break Tacos was a big example of that. I think a lot of people really liked that restaurant, but it wasn't, I found it once. My friends hardly went. It felt like it was a shame that it was difficult to find. And if you look at Classically Kate's versus, there's a tiny sign now that says there's a shoe shop, a shoe store, cobbler around the corner. It's teeny tiny. Classically Kate's is enormous. I think there needs to be some sort of consideration for what's happening to the businesses that aren't front and center. And then does it make sense to have more of a cohesive, even look in terms of the signs?
Well, we had talked about, more people here, what kind of businesses will bring people here, or if there are enough people here to service the businesses that are here. Part of that has to do with, clearly the number of, new residential, multifamily residential buildings that have been approved. And really within the last year or 2 years, I think the number is something like 900 new units that had been approved.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that is topping out? Do you think that that's too much? Do you think that, maybe Wilton could take on a little bit more, in terms of the way that.
Yeah. sorry, I'm a little concerned about whether or not Wilton has actually looked into the impact that all of these new buildings and people will have on the community. Have they done the studies on the, traffic and the way that it's going to impact the schools? Have they really looked into the impact on taxes? It's I'm, you know, I'm questioning whether or not those studies have been done and if we as a town have a good understanding of the impact. So, I can give you my opinion, but
Knowing that it has been part of those application processes, it is one of those things that developers do have to present, and it is part of the discussion. But yeah, would love your opinion. It's, the voters are going to want to know what your thought is on it.
Well, we need to meet the threshold with more, in terms of more apartments. And I think that I'd be open to them in certain places, but I think I would encourage more condo situations so that people aren't just staying in our town and then commuting into the city. It would be nice to see, options for people that want to live here, but at a different, pay rate or a different, tax rate.
And then towards that end, I mean, with the height requirements that have
Yeah.
gone in the town center, I get a feeling you have thoughts about that. I mean, did P&Z drop the ball on allowing?
Hmm. I, I mean, I'm conflicted. I think some people I've spoken to feel that the building near the library is actually not that offensive, where other people are very disturbed by it and worry what is, happening to the town. Um, I think that we can't turn back the clock on certain things, and it's my understanding that the reason that that building happened the way that it did was they were also waiting on answers from P&Z for 9 months, and then I think they just decided to go 830G and work around because they didn't have whatever they needed from them at that point. Um, the buildings that are coming near Kimco, that's another situation where if it were a business situation and you realized that of the 205 or 208 apartments that you've approved, only 3 affordable housing in there, like I would go back and say, hey, it looks like we had an oversight. Can we please, collaborate at this point and work together? You've put millions into this project. We've been working with you for a year. Let's try and get the number a little bit higher so that we both feel satisfied. So there's that. Overall, I don't think that the height in terms of the town can sustain, where we're at now. It would be nice if we were able to, cap it where it's at. And then the Kimco hopefully is far enough back that it doesn't necessarily impact the look of the Wilton Town Center. So yeah, I'm trying to give a political answer here where, you know, I don't want to see Wilton turn into a strip mall, and I don't want to see it turn into, while Norwalk is fun, it's not Wilton. We have a town center and we should celebrate it in a way that brings us all together instead of allowing things to just happen that the community can potentially get upset about. And places like down by Trackside, or maybe where the Gulf is around there, those are potentially places to explore some other options because they already don't, they're already developed differently.
I mean, I think we've covered basically, the topics that we wanted to hit at. The last thing we're going to ask you is, what's your 30-second elevator pitch for why voters should vote for you?
My 30-second elevator pitch. Well, I think voters should vote. I think voters should vote for me for the Planning and Zoning Commission because I care deeply about the town. I want to see our town come together and be more collaborative in terms of the way that we interact around the design that's coming up and the development. I've had a lot of experience running, teams of people and working with all different types of personalities. And I know that there's a way that whether you're a Democrat or Republican, we're all from Wilton. We all want what's best for Wilton, and we have a lot more in common than we do, not in common here in Wilton. And I love my neighbors, and I think that I'd bring a lot of positive energy to Planning and Zoning Commission, which sounds, like it's a lot of hard work, and I wouldn't be wanting to do this if I didn't deeply care about the town. So.
Margit, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.